Jake Morrison had spent the last 8 years of his life fixing things that no one else wanted to touch. Drilling rigs that don't work in the freezing cold. Life support systems failed at 3 in the morning. Corporate said it would be cheaper to replace than fix. But Jake always figured out how to make it work. That was either his gift or his curse. They called him when things went wrong on Kepler 186, a miserable ice mining colony at the edge of human space. The moon had no air, no warmth, and nothing but ice that went on forever and the promise of rare minerals buried kilometers below the surface. Jake kept coming back year after year because the pay was good enough. After a few months, his co-workers left because they couldn't handle the isolation and the cold that got into their bones even through 3 layers of insulation. But Jake stayed. He had nowhere else to go, and broken machines never judged him. That morning, the wind was blowing at a chill factor of -40. As Jake rode the equipment lift down into Shaft 7, his visor kept frosting over. The drilling supervisor, a big man named Patterson, had called him at 5 in the morning to complain again. The drill hit something and stopped working. Fix it quickly because the company wants the quotas to be met by the end of the week. Jake went down 3 kilometers into the ice, and every time the cable lift jolted, his toolbox hit his hip. The drill site was supposed to be a normal place to get things out. According to geological surveys, there is nothing special about it. Just ice, rock, and hopefully some valuable mineral deposits that would make it worth keeping the colony going for another 3 months. Jake's headlamp lit up the darkness when the lift finally stopped at the bottom of the shaft. The huge drill bit had broken through the ice wall and stopped, its teeth frozen in place. That was odd. These drills were meant to get through anything. Jake walked carefully, stepping on the new ice shards that were scattered on the floor. Then he noticed it. There was a hole beyond the drill and the broken ice wall. A big empty space that shouldn't be this low down. And in the middle of that space, frozen in ice that looked like it had been there forever, was a ship. Jake stood there for a whole minute, unable to make sense of what he was seeing. The ship was huge, maybe 200 meters long, and its hull seemed to soak up light instead of bouncing it back. The surface was perfectly smooth and had organic curves that made it look more like a living thing than a machine. No rivets. There are no seams. There are no marks of any kind. It wasn't human at all. That was not like anything humans had ever made. He shook his hands as he turned on his radio. There was static on the line before Patterson's voice came through. Jake tried to explain what he was seeing, but he kept getting his words mixed up, and the supervisor just sounded angry. Probably just space junk that got stuck in the ice when the moon formed, Patterson said with a shrug. Mark the spot and move the drill 20 meters to the east. We are behind schedule. Patterson had already hung up, so Jake wanted to argue. The man wasn't interested in strange alien ships. He was only interested in bonuses and quotas. Jake was supposed to mark the spot, write a report that no one would read, and then go back to work. But he couldn't stop looking at the ship. He felt drawn to it in some way. It could have been curiosity. Maybe it was the same stubborn urge that made him fix machines that were impossible to fix instead of giving up like everyone else. Jake knew he had to get closer no matter what it was. He finished his shift, filled out the paperwork, and then waited for the colony to get used to its evening routine. Then he got his climbing gear and went back down to Shaft 7 without telling anyone. This was probably a very bad idea. The rules of the colony were very strict about exploring without permission. But Jake had never been good at following rules that didn't make sense. It took 20 minutes to get down. The ice walls around him glowed softly in the light of his headlamp. They had been there for a long time and hadn't been touched until the drill broke through. Jake tied off his climbing rope when he got to the hole and rappelled down to the ship. He could hear his heart pounding in his helmet. As he got closer, the hull looked bigger, and the black surface drank in the light from his headlamp. While he was going down, Jake's glove got stuck on a sharp piece of ice. He heard the material rip and felt the cold air hit his bare hand all of a sudden. He touched the hull to try to keep his balance. His open palm touched the old metal. For a second, nothing happened. Then the whole ship came to life. Brilliant blue light shot out in lines across the surface, following patterns that Jake couldn't understand. The ice around him started to shine. It was like a door opening in a room he didn't know was there. Something big and old was waking up, and it knew he was there. Jake tried to pull his hand away, but he couldn't. The light got brighter and spread across the whole ship like electric veins carrying impossible power. People were screaming at him to leave and evacuate right away on his radio. But Jake couldn't move because he was both scared and amazed. Whatever had been sleeping in this ice for who knows how long, it was now awake. Jake somehow knew that it was looking straight at him. Jake's hand felt like it was both burning and freezing at the same time. The blue light moving across the ship's hull was so bright that he had to close his eyes, but he could still see it through his eyelids. Patterns spiraled out from where his bare hand touched the metal, moving like living electricity through channels that hadn't been there a moment before. The glow bounced off the old ice around him, making the whole hole look more like a cathedral than a mining shaft. His radio was going crazy. Some people were yelling at him to leave, while others were yelling at him to tell them what he had done. In the background, Jake could hear the colony alarms starting to go off. Someone yelled something about earthquakes. Another voice yelled about an energy signature they didn't know about that was messing up their sensors. But Jake couldn't say anything. He couldn't get up. Something was pushing against his mind. It wasn't painful, but it was too much. It was like trying to hear a whisper in the middle of a thunderstorm, but the whisper was in his head and the storm was made up of thoughts that weren't his. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the pressure stopped. Jake fell back, gasping for breath that he didn't know he had been holding. He almost fell when his hand slipped off the hull, but he caught himself on the climbing rope just in time. There were no burns or injuries on his palm, but he could still feel the ghost of that connection tingling across his skin. The ship's light pattern settled down into a steady pulse, like a heart beating. Then a part of the hull just opened. There was no hatch, no mechanical noise, and no warning. At first it was a solid black metal wall. Then all of a sudden there was an opening. There was a soft bioluminescent light inside, and Jake could see symbols moving and changing on the walls as if they were alive. Jake's brain told him to climb back up the rope and get as far away as he could. This was more than he could understand. This was the first time they met, or maybe something even stranger. He should wait for people who know what they're doing, have protocols and procedures, and know what to do if they accidentally wake up an alien spaceship. Jake did not do that. Instead, he unclipped from his rope and stepped inside. He couldn't stop himself. He had the same urge to take apart broken machines to see how they worked and the same curiosity that kept him working on problems until he found answers. His mother used to say that being curious would get him killed one day. Perhaps today was that day. The door closed behind him with a sound like a soft breath. The screaming voices on his radio stopped completely. Jake tapped his helmet radio to see if it was broken, but the equipment showed that it was working fine. The signal was just being blocked by the ship. He was cut off from the colony and was alone inside something that had been frozen in ice since before people learned how to make fire. The inside was nothing like any other spacecraft Jake had ever worked on. The walls looked like they were made of living things, like the inside of a living thing. There were no sharp edges or right angles on the technology. The symbols on the walls kept changing and moving with the soft blue light. Jake reached out to touch one and his finger went right through it. He realized it was a hologram. Holographic interface that is more advanced. The symbols started to change more quickly as he went deeper into the ship. They went through what had to be hundreds of different languages, scripts, and characters that didn't look like any writing that people use. Some were geometric shapes, some looked like pictures, and some were just shapes that hurt to look at for too long. The ship was trying to talk, but it couldn't find the right words. Jake was fascinated as the cycling sped up. Then all of a sudden it stopped. Words in English appeared in front of him, floating in the air. The grammar was wrong and strange, but it was still readable. Human found. Unknown species classification. Scanning. A beam of light went over Jake's whole body. He felt that presence in his mind again, but this time he was careful, like someone trying not to wake someone up. It was somehow reading him and learning from him. Language learned. Recalibrating communication protocols. The words changed, became smoother, and sounded more natural. Jake found his voice, but it was barely a whisper. What are you? Name, Sentinel Unit 7. Defense Fleet of Remnants. Status, dormant for 80,317 local stellar cycles. For 80,000 years. Jake's legs were weak. This thing had been sleeping in the ice for a long time, even before people were fully human. Why did you get up? Jake asked. Activation trigger, compatible neural pattern found. You are unexpected human. Your species was not taken into account in the previous calculations. Before Jake could ask what that meant, all of the holographic displays in the room turned red. There were alarms going off, not loud but urgent, with a beat that made Jake's heart race even though he didn't know what it meant. Warning, the ship said, and now its fake voice sounded almost scared. Hostile entities found. Long-range sensors show that Crash Hunter ships are getting closer. They have found my activation signature. Jake could see outside the ship, past the ice, and into space above the moon through parts of the wall that suddenly became clear. 3 shapes were appearing out of thin air, smooth and dangerous. Even Jake, who wasn't very good at looking at things, could tell they were warships. They didn't look anything like the blocky, useful ships that people made. The ship kept saying, Defensive protocols require authorized pilot. The screens around Jake were showing him information he couldn't understand. Tactical data and threat assessments were scrolling by too quickly for him to read. Neural compatibility scan finished. Analysis, result not expected. Jake backed up until he hit the wall. What happened? What are you saying? He thought about the ship again, and this time he could almost feel the emotion in it. Maybe a surprise. Or wish. You can have emergency neural integration. The chance that people would get along was found to be 0.00003%. You shouldn't be able to connect with my systems. And you can. The crashed ships were getting closer outside. Jake could see weapons charging up and energy building up along their hulls. The first bombardment shook the ice moon. Explosions far away sent shockwaves through kilometers of old ice. They were trying to get to the ship by digging down to it and destroying it before it could wake up completely. How long do we have? Jake yelled over the noise. At the current rate of bombardment, it will take 17 minutes for the hull to break. I need a pilot or we'll both die. With your colony. The creche do not leave witnesses. Jake thought about the families who lived there, the workers and the kids who were born in the colony and had never been to Earth. Patterson and his quotas. Riley, who ran the cafeteria and made awful coffee. All of them were going to die because Jake couldn't stop messing with things. What do I need to do? He asked. A panel in the wall opened up, and inside was something that looked like a neural interface with fiber optic threads and pulsing light. Looked really scary. Put your hand on the interface. Be careful. In the past, attempts to integrate during emergencies have led to the death of a pilot. 42% of you will live. Jake looked at the interface and then up at the clear part of the wall that showed the crashed ships breaking through the ice above them. He thought about all the repairs he'd made that seemed impossible over the years, when people told him something couldn't be fixed and he proved them wrong. He put his hand on the interface after reaching out. Before the pain hit, he heard the ship's voice, which was quiet and almost surprised. Integration starting. Good luck, human. Then Jake's world burst into light and pain, and he learned things that no human mind should ever know. Jake woke up with knowledge he had never had before. He could figure out the coordinates for a hyperspace jump in his head. He knew how to use weapons that could break planets in half. He could read star charts for galaxies that people had never been to. He remembered battle plans from wars that happened before the sun finished forming on Earth, as if he had been there himself. It was too much and impossible, but it also felt completely normal, like remembering a dream that had always been there. He opened his eyes and was no longer looking through the visor of his helmet. He could see through the ship's sensors, which could pick up on many different types of light at once. Radiation signatures, infrared, ultraviolet, and gravitational distortions. The universe had suddenly gotten a million times more complicated and detailed than he had ever thought. Neural integration successful, Sentinel's voice said. Jake realized that he wasn't hearing it with his ears anymore. It was just there in his mind like any other thought. Historically, the survival rate for emergency integration was 12%. You are either very lucky or very stubborn, human. Jake tried to move and his body did, but it was slow, as if he were learning how to walk again. He was still in the chamber and still wearing his mining suit, but now he could feel the ship around him as if it were part of his body. He could feel every power line, every system, and every piece of old technology humming. What happened to me? Jake was able to ask out loud even though his voice was hoarse. We are now connected. My command systems work with your neural patterns. You think and I answer. I do the math and you make the choice. The remnants wanted my class of warship to be both a pilot and a vessel. There was a pause and then Sentinel said softly, but they never thought a person would be in this position. Jake watched the 3 Kresh warships move into position above the moon through the ship's sensors. They were scary beautiful, with sharp edges and a graceful way of moving that made them look like they were hunting. Each one was at least 3 times bigger than the biggest ship used by humans in the military. The dark purple metal on their hulls shone and looked like it was moving and flowing like water. Tell me about the Kresh, Jake said, trying to make sense of all the information that was coming into his head. Old enemy. Empire that kills people. They have been systematically getting rid of any species they think might be a threat to their dominance for 50,000 years. Sentinel's presence in Jake's mind was heavy, like the weight of long memories and old grief. My creators, the remnants, tried to stop them. We made ships like me to keep growing civilizations safe. We fought for 2,000 years. We lost. Jake could feel the ship's pain as if it were his own. How many of you are still alive? I am the last Sentinel. The Kresh buried me here, deep in the ice, after the last battle, where I would sleep forever. Since they couldn't kill me, they buried me instead. The sensors were aimed at the warships above. But now I'm awake. And now they will finish what they started. As the crash bombardment got worse, the moon shook. Jake could see through Sentinel's eyes as huge energy beams cut through kilometers of ice in just a few seconds. They were digging straight down toward the hole which was in front of them. Now the colony alarms were going off on every frequency. People were leaving for emergency shelters that wouldn't protect them from weapons made to destroy planets. How long until we have all the power? Jake asked, and his mechanic's mind was already working on the problem. 6 hours to fully restore the system. We don't have 6 hours. The latest estimate is that it will take Kresh forces 14 minutes to break into this room. Jake saw drop pods start to launch from the warships through the sensor feeds. When they hit the ice, they broke open and let Kresh ground troops out. The soldiers were huge, at least 8 feet tall, and wore the same purple-black armor. They moved quickly and accurately, spreading out in perfect tactical formations. Jake realized that they're not just trying to kill you. They're coming to make sure the site is safe first. Yes. They will want to study me to make sure there are no other hidden Sentinel units in the galaxy. Then they will destroy your colony so that no one else can find out about me. Sentinel stopped. I'm sorry, Jake Morrison. My awakening has put your people in danger. Jake's hands moved over the holographic controls, which felt as familiar to him as his own toolbox. He was looking at sensor data from the colony to see if there were any signs of life and how many people were still looking for shelter. 243 people, including 17 kids. Patterson was yelling orders to leave over the emergency channel. Riley was helping an old miner get to the shelter. Jenkins, the new guy who had just arrived last month, was frozen in fear outside the main habitat. Jake said firmly, "We're not dead yet. I've spent 8 years keeping broken machines running in impossible situations. This is just a bigger problem with more at stake. You don't know how big the problem is that we have. These are Kresh hunters, special forces trained to destroy remnant technology. My weapon systems are only working at 17% of their full capacity. My shields don't work very well. We are outmatched and they don't know I'm a person," Jake said, interrupting. His mind was racing. They're ready for remnant tactics. Thinking like a remnant. But I'm not a remnant. I'm a mechanic from a small colony who fixes things that shouldn't work. He could tell that Sentinel was confused because of their connection. I don't understand your reasoning. Jake began to gather information about the colony's industrial tools. Lasers for mining. Machines that process ore. The huge drilling rigs that could go through solid rock. None of it was meant to be used as weapons, but Jake had spent years figuring out how to make things work that the makers never meant for them to. Can you connect to the colony's power grid? He asked. Yes, but that would give away our exact location and they already know where we are. But they don't know what we can do. Jake's fingers flew over the controls. His human intuition and Sentinel's processing power worked together to make something that neither of them could have done alone. How hot do those lasers for mining get? Temperature on the surface is about 4,000 degrees Kelvin. But they are tools for industry, not weapons. The systems that aim are. I don't need systems for targeting. I need more firepower. Jake was already using Sentinel systems to take control of the colony's equipment, making a network that shouldn't be there. The Kresh are using those ice tunnels to get closer, right? Small spaces and little room to move? Yes, they are following the drill shafts to get to us directly. Jake smiled behind his helmet. Have you ever seen what happens when you shoot a mining laser down a tunnel? The beam doesn't go away. It jumps, gets stronger, and everything in that tunnel turns into gas. Sentinel was quiet for a moment. Then Jake felt something through their bond that could have been shock or respect. That's not how the military usually does things. Standard military doctrine is for people who have the right weapons. I work as a mechanic. We make things up. The first Kresh squad entered the drill shaft, their armored bodies moving with deadly grace. Jake waited until they were 300 meters down, deep in the tunnel with no easy way to get back. Then he turned on the mining laser. The tunnel shone like the surface of the sun. The mining laser, which was meant to cut through rock for hours at a time, made the small space into a furnace. The Kresh soldiers had only 2 seconds to figure out what they had done wrong before they were burned to death. Their armor was made to protect them from plasma weapons and energy shields, but it wasn't made to handle long periods of industrial heat in a small space. The second group went through a different tunnel. Jake brought it down on top of them with perfectly timed demolition charges. Equipment meant for controlled mining operations became makeshift weapons. Jake used Sentinel sensors to see the Kresh commanders in orbit changing their plans. They thought the remnant ship would be weaker, But they found something they couldn't have predicted. A human mind that thought in ways they had never seen before. Sentinel said, "That's an impressive adaptation. But they are getting better. And they are still better at orbiting." To prove the point, the biggest Kresh warship started charging its main weapon, which built up energy along its spine until it glowed white-hot. That cannon could shoot through the moon and turn the whole colony into dust. Then, every screen, radio, and communication device in the colony lit up with the same message. A Kresh commander's face came into view. It had strange features that looked like they were angry or happy. The translation was in mechanical English. "Give up the remnant ship right away. We have taken care of your breeding complex and your offspring. Follow the rules within 60 seconds or face the consequences." Jake's blood ran cold. He could see it through Sentinel's cameras. The Kresh were all around the colony school. The teacher, Miss Peterson, was trying to protect the kids with her own body. 17 kids, all between the ages of 6 and 14, were scared and huddled together. "Jake," Sentinel said softly, "we need to protect the ship. The strategic value of—" "No." The word came out flat and clear. "The needs of the many," I said no. Jake was already moving his hands over the controls, following a plan that made Sentinel's tactical processors scream warnings. "People don't work that way. We don't leave our kids behind. Always. Not for anything. Making decisions based on feelings will lead to our end." Jake thought about Jenkins, who had just come from Earth and was scared of the dark. About Riley's terrible coffee that everyone pretended to like. Patterson's daughter wanted to be an engineer when she grew up. He thought about the 17 kids who hadn't done anything wrong except be born on a colony that just so happened to be on top of an old warship. "Yeah," Jake said in a low voice. "Maybe that's why you lost your war and why we'll win ours. The emotional choice is the only choice that matters to people sometimes." Jake looked at the picture of the 17 kids huddled together in the colony school, with their teacher trying to be brave while Kresh soldiers surrounded the building. 43 seconds were left on the countdown timer on his screen. "You have 43 seconds to give up the ship or watch kids die." The Kresh thought they had him trapped and knew how things would turn out. They were wrong. "Sentinel, you have to trust me," Jake said, his hands already moving quickly over the holographic controls. "Can you make us look hurt? Like we're not even working? I don't get your plan." "You don't have to. Please just answer the question. Can you make it look like our systems are really damaged? Make it look like we're dead?" Sentinel took a moment to think about this. "Yes. I can vent plasma, make fake energy signatures, and make multiple systems fail in a cascade. But this will make us look weak too. That's just what I want." Jake was pulling up blueprints of the whole colony, including every building, piece of equipment, and maintenance tunnel he had crawled through in the 8 years he had been keeping this place running. "They think they can beat us. Let them believe that for a little longer. There are 28 seconds left on the clock." Jake could see more Kresh troops moving into position around the colony's important areas thanks to the ship's sensors. They were thorough and professional, making sure that power stations, communication hubs, and escape routes were safe. They had done this before, probably thousands of times in thousands of worlds. But they had never done it on Jake Morrison's colony. Jake told them to start the damage simulation and open a line of communication with the Kresh commander. Sentinel hesitated, which was strange because Jake didn't think AI could hesitate. "Are you going to negotiate?" "Something like that." The main screen showed the Kresh commander's face. His alien features were hard to read, but he looked sure of himself. The translation software made its voice sound cold and robotic when it spoke. "You have 10 seconds left, human. Give up or your children will die." Jake made sure that his face was clear on the transmission. He wanted them to see him, how young and normal he was. "It's just a mechanic in a mining suit, nothing special. I'm shutting down the ship now. Don't hurt those kids, okay?" Jake could tell that Sentinel was confused through their neural link as he started to turn off systems that weren't needed. The energy readings went down. The lights in the room got dimmer. To anyone looking from the outside, the old warship was dying. The Kresh commander made a noise that could have meant he was happy. "Good choice. Stay in the boat. My soldiers will take you away for processing." The transmission stopped. Jake saw the Kresh forces start to gather around the ice cavity where Sentinel was buried through the sensors. Every soldier and tactical unit was moving toward what they thought was an easy target. The guards around the school let their perimeter down, sure that the threat was gone. "Jake, they're coming to kill us," Sentinel said in a hurry. "We can't defend ourselves in this state." "No, we're not. We're right where I want us to be." Jake's fingers were moving over controls that most people wouldn't even know were controls. He was using the colony's automated systems and the maintenance plans he had written himself over the years to keep everything running. Have you ever heard of a honeypot trap? I don't. You look weak when you do that. Get the enemy to put all of their troops in one place. Then you hit them where it hurts. Jake pulled up the grid for the colony's industrial equipment. He had fixed every mining laser or processor and heavy piece of machinery 100 times. I need 3 minutes. Can you buy me 3 minutes? Against this many creche? Not really. But Jake, what about the kids? Jake smiled sadly. That's what the 3 minutes are for. He started the first step of his plan. All of the colony's automated maintenance drones turned on at the same time. These weren't combat units, they were just simple machines that could do basic cleaning and repairs. But there were a lot of them, and they all started moving toward the school at the same time from different places. The creche guards saw it right away. Their weapons followed the drones that were getting closer, trying to figure out how dangerous they were. It didn't need to be a big deal, but it wasn't. Jake only needed them to look the wrong way for 30 seconds. 2 people crawled through a maintenance tunnel that Jake had sealed off 3 months ago after a small cave-in. They were going to the basement of the school. Tommy Rodriguez was one of them. He was the colony's other mechanic, and Jake had trained him himself. The other was Dr. Lisa Park, the colony's doctor who had treated Jake for frostbite more times than he could count. When the creche made their demands, Jake sent them emergency instructions right away using Sentinel's communication systems. Tommy, you're under the foundation now, Jake whispered as he watched through the colony's security cameras. 3rd panel from the left. The password is still my mom's birthday. Tommy's hands found the access panel on the screen. The school had a second evacuation tunnel that was built in the early days of the colony when they were worried about buildings falling down. Corporate had told him to seal it up to save money, but Jake had kept it working just in case. His bosses had said he was paranoid. At the moment he was glad he was paranoid. Ms. Peterson quickly and quietly led the kids into the tunnel as they began to disappear into the floor. The creche guards were still watching the maintenance drones that were coming toward them. Their tactical assessment showed that the simple machines didn't pose a real threat. 2 minutes have passed. 17 kids and 1 teacher are now crawling through the dark toward the colony's emergency shelter, which is 300 meters away. Jake's heart raced as he watched them move through thermal sensors. The creche forces were almost at Sentinel's position, their weapons charged and ready to break into the chamber. Their commander was probably enjoying this moment, the capture of the last remnant warship and the destruction of a human colony that had seen too much. Sentinel said, 30 seconds until they're in range. Jake, we need to put up shields or... Not yet. Not yet. Jake saw the last child go into the tunnel. Ms. Peterson closed the access panel behind her. The creche guards finally noticed something was wrong and went to the school to check on their hostages. Now, Jake yelled. All of Sentinel's systems came to life at once. The damage was all fake. Jake had been hiding power reserves and capacitors and backup systems. The ship wasn't going to die at all. It had been coiled like a spring ready to let go. Jake didn't go after the creche soldiers in the tunnels of ice. He went after their ships that were in space. Sentinel's main weapons worked at 17% of their full power, which was more than enough when the people they were shooting at didn't expect them to fight back. The first creche warship's engine core was hit directly before its shields could fully activate. Jake also turned on all of the colony's mining lasers at the same time. But he wasn't aiming them at the creche troops on the ground. He was aiming them at the ice under the creche ground troops. The beams cut through permafrost that had been stable for millions of years, making huge problems. At once, the ground opened up under 50 creche soldiers. They fell into cracks that Jake had just made, falling hundreds of meters into the dark. Those who didn't fall scrambled for stable ground, and their perfect tactical formation fell apart. Impossible, Sentinel whispered in Jake's head. You turned the land into a weapon. I fixed things on an ice moon. No one knows this rock better than I do. Jake was already in the 3rd phase. The ore processors in the colony could make a lot of heat to separate minerals from raw materials. He set them all off, which caused thermal blooms that messed up the creche ship's targeting systems. Jake led Sentinel up and out of the hole through the chaos of heat distortion, gunfire, and ice that was breaking up. When systems that hadn't moved in 80,000 years suddenly came to life, the ship's hull groaned with stress. In a blast of ice and old rock, they broke through the moon's surface. The second creche warship was able to raise its shields and fire back. Energy beams that could turn a city block into gas hit Sentinel's hull. As armor plating that had survived the war that destroyed the remnants faced its first real test in thousands of years, alarms went off. Hull integrity at 63%, Sentinel said. We can't take another direct hit like that. Jake's mind raced as he combined his mechanics intuition with Sentinel's tactical database. The Kresh ships were faster, had better weapons, and were fully operational. Sentinel was running on backup power and repairs that weren't planned. They would lose in minutes if they fought straight. Jake didn't fight fair then. He dove back toward the moon's surface, using the land he knew by heart. He drove Sentinel through the narrow canyons between ice formations, where the huge Kresh warships couldn't go without putting themselves in danger of crashing. He used the colony's communication arrays as makeshift missile guidance systems, sending targeting data through civilian equipment that the Kresh hadn't bothered to block. When Jake launched a mining charge from a maintenance shuttle and blew it up next to a Kresh ship's sensor array, it turned into a proximity mine. The blast was small compared to military weapons, but it blinded the ship's targeting systems at a very important time. Jake only needed that one moment. Sentinel's weapons, which were charged with every last joule of power, punched through the ship's shields and cored it like an apple. The warship leaned to one side, leaving behind debris and atmosphere as it limped away from the fight. 2 Kresh warships were damaged, but one is still fully operational and very angry. The other commander started a new pattern of bombardment, this time not hitting the ship but the colony itself. If they couldn't catch Sentinel, they'd kill everyone who saw this disaster. Jake was horrified to see energy beams cutting through the habitat modules. In an instant, the western wing of the apartment building disappeared. Jake could see on the casualty readouts that they had lost people, but the emergency bulkheads had closed, saving most of the colonists. Mrs. Chun was in charge of the supply depot. The Kowalski brothers worked the night shift on the drill. Gone in a flash of alien fire. Jake whispered, "They're going to kill everyone." "Yes," Sentinel said quietly. "Unless we stop them. But we are almost out of power. I think there is a 4% chance that I will win against the last warship." Jake thought about Patterson, who had called him paranoid for keeping the emergency tunnel open. Tommy and Dr. Park put everything on the line to save those kids. About 8 years of fixing broken things in impossible situations and never giving up, even when everyone else said it was impossible. Jake said, 4% is better than 0. And I've worked on machines that had even worse odds than that. He pointed Sentinel at the last Kresh warship, which looked like a moth flying into a flamethrower. He felt something from the old AI through their neural link. It could have been pride or the machine's version of a smile. Now let's see what a remnant and a person can do together. The last Kresh warship hung in space above the colony like a predator that had finally had enough. Jake could see through Sentinel's sensors that it was charging its main cannon, which could break a moon in half if it had enough time. The energy buildup was huge and it made the front of the ship look like a tiny sun. They had about 90 seconds before that weapon went off and turned everything Jake had ever known into dust and memories. "Sentinel, how much power do we still have?" Jake asked, moving his hands over the controls that felt more and more natural. 17% of the ability to fight. Shields don't work very well. Life support is stable but the weapon systems are running on backup power. The AI stopped for a moment. "We have enough power for maybe 2 more shots from our main cannon, or we can strengthen our shields for about 40 seconds of continuous bombardment." Not both of them. Jake got all the information he could find about the Kresh ship. Its shield frequencies, weapon placements, and power distribution. It was a work of art in military engineering, built over thousands of years of conquest. Every flaw had been found and fixed. Through many battles, all weaknesses had been removed. But Jake had learned something as a mechanic that the Kresh had never thought of. As things got more advanced, their systems got harder to understand. And the designers never thought about where complex systems might fail. It wasn't about finding the enemy's known weakness. It was about making a weakness that they didn't know could happen. "Is it possible to get to the colony's power grid from here?" Jake asked all of a sudden. "Yes, but the power output from a civilian mining colony is very small compared to—" "I'm not looking for power. I'm looking for a sign." Jake's mind was racing as he came up with a plan that was probably crazy but might be just crazy enough to work. "Those Kresh ships have advanced targeting systems, don't they? Multiple sensor arrays, quantum computing, and predictive algorithms?" "Right. Their targeting systems can find and destroy thousands of things at once with an accuracy of 99.7%. "That's the problem," Jake said, almost laughing at how silly what he was about to do was. "They're too good. Too exact. They've made themselves so good that they're stuck." He typed commands faster than he had ever moved before. His fingers flew across holographic keyboards while his mind worked through calculations that used both human intuition and Sentinel's processing power. The colony's communication array, the mining drones, the automated maintenance systems, and even the simple distress beacons in the emergency shuttles. Anything that could send out a signal. "I'm going to flood their sensors," Jake said as he worked. "Every piece of equipment in this colony is going to start screaming on every frequency at the same time. Radio waves, infrared light, quantum entanglement markers, and changes in gravity. Their targeting system can keep track of and rank thousands of threats. So I'm going to give them 10,000 fake targets. That won't stop their main weapon from firing. They can hit the colony's coordinates directly without using any sensors. No, but it will blind them for about 10 seconds while their computers try to figure out all that junk data." Jake pulled up the reactor cores of the colony. "And in those 10 seconds I'm going to do something really dumb." Jake saw the Kresh cannon reach 80% charge through Sentinel's sensors. It could fire in 60 seconds. The ship's shields were at their strongest, and its point defense systems were up and running, ready to stop any attack. It was an unbreakable fortress, and Jake was flying a broken old relic that was held together by backup power and hope. "What do you want to do?" Sentinel asked, and Jake could tell that the fake voice was worried. "I'm going to hit them." Jake wondered if he had broken their neural connection because the silence that followed was so complete. Then Sentinel's voice came back, very carefully controlled. "That will kill us both. The effect will." "No, it won't. Because I'm not really going to hit them." Jake was sending all of Sentinel's remaining power to its engines, the FTL drive, and anything else that could make it move. "I just need them to believe I'm going to hit them. I need them to do something." The Kresh weapon would fire in 45 seconds. Jake turned on all of the colony's signal generators at the same time. The electromagnetic noise around them exploded, and false targets appeared on every sensor spectrum like fireworks. Mining drones sending out distress signals. Communication arrays that go through every frequency. Maintenance bots giving off heat signatures that looked like weapon charges. Jake could see the chaos on the Kresh ship's bridge through the ship's outside cameras, which Sentinel had somehow hacked into. Holographic screens showed thousands of possible threats, and their advanced targeting AI tried to tell the difference between real threats and false positives. Their main weapon charge stopped for a moment, dropping to 75% as power was sent to sensors and analysis systems. Jake aimed Sentinel straight at the Kresh warship and turned the engines all the way up. They sped toward the enemy ship like a missile, and if they hit, both ships would break apart and become a cloud of debris. "Collision in 23 seconds, Sentinel said. "Jake, if you don't change course." Jake said, "Trust me," as the distance between them closed. The Kresh ship was getting bigger in their view, taking up the whole sky. He could see the glow of their shields, weapon ports, and armor plates. "Just have faith in me." There were 30 seconds left until the main cannon fired. 20 seconds until the crash. The Kresh had to make a decision. They could keep charging their weapon and risk crashing into each other, which would destroy both of them, or they could drop their shields and send all their power to evasive maneuvers. They picked survival. Jake could feel the moment their shields flickered and fell. All that energy went to their engines as the huge warship tried to get out of Sentinel's way. The Kresh warship was completely unprotected for 3 or 4 seconds. Jake put all of the remaining power into Sentinel's FTL drive, but instead of jumping to hyperspace he made a localized spacetime distortion. The math was crazy, like something that should have taken a group of physicists and a supercomputer to figure out. But Jake's brain was connected to Sentinel's processing power, and in less than a second, they made the impossible happen. Time itself stuttered. The Kresh ship's evasive maneuver suddenly happened at a very slow speed, as if it were moving in slow motion. For the people inside it was only a few microseconds. He had almost a full minute to act for Jake. He didn't waste it. Sentinel's last 2 shots hit the unprotected Kresh hull at point-blank range. The impacts ripped through armor that was meant to protect against weapons that could break planets, but it wasn't meant to handle that kind of focused energy without shields. The beams went right through the ship, damaging important systems, blowing up ammo stores and breaking the reactor containment. The time distortion fell apart. Jake barely got Sentinel to make a sharp turn, missing the Kresh ship by less than 100 meters. The enemy warship suddenly took all the damage at once because time caught up with it. Secondary explosions shook the hull. The main weapon, which was still 75% charged, backfed into broken systems and blew up inside the ship. The Kresh warship broke in half, and the 2 pieces fell away from each other, leaving behind atmosphere and burning debris. Escape pods shot off in all directions and the crew that survived left the ship. Jake let out a breath he didn't know he had been holding. Sentinel coasted on momentum with all of its systems down and only emergency power keeping it going. They floated by the Kresh ship that was dying and the field of debris, heading out into empty space. Jake whispered, We did it. We really did it. Impossible, Sentinel said, and Jake could hear how amazed the fake voice was. Even my creators thought that method was just a theory. The energy needs, the math, and the chance of a huge failure. How did you? Jake said. I fix things that are broken for a living. He was finally feeling tired, like a physical weight. You learn how to make things work even when they shouldn't. Especially when it shouldn't. Jake watched the colony's emergency crews start to come out of their shelters through the sensors. The evacuation tunnels were safe for the kids. Tommy was in charge of the rescue efforts. Dr. Park was already getting a triage center ready for the hurt. They had lost too many people, but they had made it. Then Sentinel's long-range sensors went off. Jake's heart sank when he saw what they were finding. More than a dozen FTL signatures are coming together from all over the sector to their location. Please tell me those are human ships coming to help, Jake said, even though he already knew the answer. No. Kresh fleet of reinforcements. They found out about the fight. They are coming to look into it. Sentinel's voice was low, almost like he was sorry. Jake, I think there are at least 40 warships. In about 4 hours they will be here. We can't fight them. We can hardly move. Jake looked at the sensor readouts that showed the huge force coming toward them. There are 40 ships. 40 crews that had spent thousands of years getting better at genocide. All of them coming together at a small mining colony that had just destroyed 3 of their ships with nothing but quick thinking and stubbornness. They're not coming to look into it, Jake said slowly as the truth began to dawn on him. They're coming to get rid of witnesses. To kill anyone who knows that one of their ships was destroyed by an old wreck and a human mechanic. Yes. The Kresh can't let this loss get out. They will clean this moon and every human colony nearby. Your kind has been labeled as a threat. Sentinel stopped. I'm sorry, Jake. My awakening has put your people in danger. Jake sat in the command room where systems were failing and lights were flickering. He thought about all the things he had lost that day. The colonists who didn't survive. The easy life he had just a few hours ago, when his biggest problem was fixing a broken drill. He thought about all the people living on dozens of worlds, not knowing that an empire that had been killing civilizations since before humans discovered fire had just marked them for death. Then he thought about those 17 kids who were now safe because he had refused to believe the impossible. About Tommy and Dr. Park, who had put everything on the line because they believed Jake's crazy idea would work. For about 8 years, I fixed broken machines by not believing that anything was really broken. Sentinel, Jake said softly, you said you were the last of your kind. The last ship of the remnant. Yes. The war destroyed all the others. Are you sure about that? From where I'm sitting, the Kresh spent 80,000 years making sure you stayed buried instead of just killing you. That tells me you're hard to kill. Very hard to kill. Jake pulled up the star charts and looked at the huge galaxy around them. So maybe they didn't blow up all the other Sentinel ships. They might have just buried them. Put them away. They put them in different places in space where they would never wake up. He could tell that Sentinel was paying more attention and thinking about this. If other units lived, they would have no pilots. No one to connect with. Jake smiled as he thought about all the mechanics, engineers, and tinkerers who lived in space. People who worked their whole lives to fix things that were impossible, who looked at problems that everyone else had given up on and said, there's always a way. People who were so stubborn that they became friends with old warships that killed their original crews. Sentinel, can you find other ships that are like you? Even if they're buried, sleeping, or hiding. There was a long break. Then, Sentinel's presence in Jake's mind grew stronger, like hope waking up after sleeping for 80,000 years. Yes. I can see 47 faint signatures. Other Sentinel units are spread out across the galaxy. All asleep. All waiting. Jake's hands moved over the controls as he got ready to send out a message that would change everything. Then let's get them up. Jake looked at the holographic map in front of him. It showed 47 points of light scattered across the galaxy like stars that had been forgotten. Each one was a dormant Sentinel unit, buried and waiting for someone crazy enough to wake them up. His hands were shaking, but not because he was scared, it was because he was tired and the adrenaline was finally catching up with his body. He had been awake for more than 30 hours, most of which he had spent fighting for his life against an empire that had mastered genocide long before people learned how to make fire. Sentinel, how long do we have until that Kresh fleet gets here? Jake asked, knowing he wouldn't like the answer. 3 hours and 42 minutes. I have looked at the ways they are approaching. They are not coming to talk or look into things. This is a fleet for extermination. Sentinel's voice was heavy with experience, having seen this exact situation happen over and over again in many different worlds. They will wipe out this colony and then methodically destroy every human settlement within 20 light years. Your kind will be called terminate on contact. Jake thought about Earth and all the billions of people who had no idea they were about to die. He thought about the outer colonies where families were trying to start over on worlds that weren't friendly. All of them were about to face an enemy they didn't know existed and couldn't hope to beat. Then we sent out the coordinates, Jake said firmly. Every place where a Sentinel ship is buried. We send it out on every channel and frequency. People, aliens, everything. We tell everyone who can hear that the world needs mechanics, engineers, and people who can fix things that are broken. People who won't give up. Jake, when everything is perfect, the neural bonding process kills 75% of the time. The survival rate drops to 12% during emergency integration like ours. It felt like Sentinel was protecting him in his mind. You are asking your people to volunteer for death that is almost certain. I'm asking them to help save the world. There is a difference. Jake was already writing the message in his head, picking words that would get through to the right people. Not scientists, soldiers, or politicians. How things work. The people who kept civilization going when everything fell apart. Also, that 12% was based on aliens trying to bond with ships made for other aliens. We are people. We change. We make it through things we shouldn't. That's pretty much what we do. He began to broadcast before Sentinel could say anything else. The message went out on every frequency the ship could pick up. It was sent out in dozens of languages and through quantum channels that would reach across the galaxy almost instantly. My name is Jake Morrison, and I work as a maintenance mechanic on the Kepler 186 colony. If you can hear this, the world needs you. I'm sending you the coordinates for ancient warships and weapons left behind by a civilization that fought to protect people like us. These ships need people to drive them. The process of bonding is risky. You might not make it. But if we don't fight and try, an empire that has been destroying civilizations for 50,000 years will kill every one of us. We need mechanics. We need engineers. We need people who will keep trying even when things seem impossible. The Kresh are on their way. We have 3 hours to get ready. Morrison is out. He put the coordinates in and hit send. The message spread through the network, bouncing off relay stations and reaching every part of human space where someone might be listening. Now we wait, Jake said as he slumped back in the command chair, which had molded itself to fit his body. His mining suit had 3 holes in it, his hands were burned and he didn't remember getting them, and every muscle in his body hurt like he'd been hit by a truck. Jake, even if other people respond, they won't be able to get to those places in 3 hours. The closest Sentinel unit is 2 days away at the fastest speed possible. We will fight this fleet by ourselves. The tactical displays on Sentinel showed the Kresh ships coming closer, their formations deadly and precise. I think we should leave the colony. Put as many people as you can on ships and send them to systems that don't have any people living in them. Some may live long enough to warn Earth. No. Jake sat up even though his body was telling him not to. We're not going to run. We're buying time. There's no way we can survive against 40 Kresh warships in any tactical situation. My combat systems are out of power. We don't have any weapons, shields, or power. Mathematically, it can't happen. Jake laughed and it sounded a little crazy. Do you know what else was impossible in math? A maintenance mechanic teaming up with an AI that is 80,000 years old and beating 3 Kresh hunters in a fight with mining tools. People keep telling me things are impossible and I'm getting really tired of it. He opened the colony's industrial database, which was the same tool he had used to fight off the first wave. Most of it was broken now, with dead power cells and systems that weren't working. Jake, on the other hand, had been fixing broken things for 8 years. He knew every piece of equipment on this rock and what it could do, even when it shouldn't work. Jake said slowly, the colony's main reactor, as an idea came to him. It's a plant for fusion, right? It gives power to everything on the site. That's right. Standard commercial fusion reactor made to make power in a stable way for a long time. Output of about 1.2 petawatts. What if we made it not stable? Jake felt Sentinel's presence get sharper with fear. You can't be saying what I think you're saying. The Kresh are coming here to destroy the colony no matter what. They're going to kill everyone no matter what we do. Jake was already doing math in his head, trying to remember all the physics classes he had skipped in high school. But if we set off a reactor overload at the right time, we could make an explosion big enough to destroy half of that fleet when they get there. The blast would also kill us. And everyone in the colony. Not if we leave first. Put everyone on shuttles and send them to the outer system. Before the Kresh get there, they'll be clear. Jake pulled up the evacuation plans and routes that he had helped make years ago during a safety drill that everyone thought was useless. We stay behind, make sure all the crush ships come to this exact spot and make ourselves seen. Then we start the reactor and jump away at the last minute. Our FTL drive isn't working. Making that time distortion field took up all of our remaining power. Jake smiled. I understand. That's why we aren't using the FTL drive. We're using the colony's backup propulsion system. Sentinel was quiet for a moment as he thought about this. The emergency system is meant to change the colony's orbit if an asteroid hits it. It makes just enough thrust to move a stationary installation a few hundred meters. It can't move a warship. It can if we get rid of everything that isn't necessary. Weapons we can't use, armor plates we don't need, and every system that uses power. Jake was already putting marks on the ship's schematic. We make ourselves light enough so that even that weak propulsion can move us. We don't have to go very far, just far enough to be out of the blast zone when the reactor goes critical. This plan has 17 big problems that could go wrong. The timing has to be just right. If the evacuation takes too long, the crush get there early. If the reactor cascade doesn't reach critical mass, if the colony's propulsion system fails, if... Jake cut in with, if. I spent my whole career making plans that could fail in a dozen different ways. You know how many really failed? Not as many as you think. Because I plan for things to go wrong. I make sure there are backups. I make backup plans for the backup plans. He looked up the colony's plans for leaving. We have 3 hours. Let's put them to use. Jake's next 2 hours were the most intense of his life, and that was saying a lot after the day he'd had. He planned the reactor overload, figured out which parts of Sentinel could be thrown away, and coordinated the evacuation of the colony all at the same time. Patterson, the colonial administrator, talked for 10 minutes about leaving the facility before Jake just cut his feed and kept working. Tommy Rodriguez was very helpful in setting up the reactor's containment field to fail in the right order. Dr. Park planned the evacuation with military precision, putting every colonist on shuttles in order of how vulnerable they were. First the kids, then the old people, and finally anyone hurt in the first attack. Jake watched through security cameras as people slowly moved out of the house he had lived in for 8 years. The cafeteria where Riley made awful coffee. The maintenance bay where he had spent a lot of time fixing things. The small space he had lived in, which was barely big enough for a bed and a locker. Everything was about to become ground zero for an explosion that could be seen from 3 star systems away. Last shuttle is gone, Tommy said over the radio. Jake, that's everyone. It's time for you to leave. Not yet. Someone needs to set off the reactor from here. The crush will pick up the signal and block it, so remote detonation won't work. Then I'm staying too. You need someone to... No, Jake said firmly. You have to keep those people safe, Tommy. Get them to the meeting place. That's an order. There was a long break. Then Tommy's voice came back, shaky with feeling. Don't die, Morrison. Who else will fix my mistakes? The comm stopped working. As the last shuttle sped away from the colony, its engines flared up. It was racing to get away before hell broke loose. Jake watched it leave, feeling more alone than he had ever felt before. He was alone except for an old AI in his head and a plan that would probably kill him. Sentinel said, the crush fleet is 2 minutes away. They are keeping their attack formation. They don't think anything is wrong. Jake's hands moved over the controls, making last-minute changes to the reactor's containment field. The fusion core was already getting too hot, with the temperature going above safe levels. It would reach critical mass in 90 seconds. It would explode with the force of a small sun going supernova 30 seconds later. Are you scared? Sentinel asked in a low voice. Jake thought about it. Yeah. Actually, I'm scared. But I'm more scared of what will happen if we don't try. We can't just let the crush win. He finished the last math problem and locked in the order. My dad used to say that being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It's about being afraid and still doing the right thing. Your dad seems like he was a smart guy. He worked as a mechanic. Worked on fixing starship engines on Earth. He died while fixing a reactor that was about to go critical. Jake smiled, but it was a sad smile. Guess it runs in the family. The crush fleet came out of FTL in perfect formation, and 40 warships appeared in the space above the colony like demons coming from hell. Their weapons were already charging, and their targeting systems were locking onto Sentinel's position. They had learned from their last loss. They weren't taking any chances this time. Jake turned on the colony's emergency propulsion system. The old chemical thrusters sputtered to life and pushed against Sentinel's bare hull. They started to move slowly, but then they sped up. The crush noticed right away and changed their formation to follow. Great. Jake needed them all to be close and focused on this one spot. The temperature in the reactor reached a dangerous level. Containment fields started to fall apart. The crushed commander must have seen it because the whole fleet suddenly tried to turn around, engines roaring as they realized they were in a trap. It's too late. Too late. Jake pushed the colony's propulsion to its limit, getting every last bit of thrust from systems that were only meant to make small changes to the orbit. Sentinel lurched forward, moving just fast enough and just far enough. The reactor blew up behind them with the power of a new star. The blast wave hit the crushed fleet in a perfect kill zone, breaking through shields, melting armor, and turning advanced warships into clouds of superheated plasma that kept growing. 23 ships died right away. 12 more were hurt and fell through space. 5 of them were able to jump away before the explosion hit them. Sentinel was hit by the shockwave like a hammer. Jake could feel the ship's systems failing, the bulkheads bending, and the neural interface screaming warnings right into his brain. The explosion was too strong and the distance wasn't quite far enough for them to stay together. "Jake, I'm losing hull integrity," Sentinel said in a hurry. "We're not going to." Then something that couldn't happen happened. In front of them, space itself ripped open, revealing a swirling vortex of colors that shouldn't be there. A jump point, but not one that any human technology could make. Jake saw a ship coming out of the vortex through his sensors. Then another one. Then a lot more. Ships that watch over things. 47 old warships all answered Jake's message and all got there at the right time. Jake could feel the minds of people inside each one. People from all over human space who work with machines and fix things. People who heard what he had to say and made the hard choice. People who had touched ancient hulls and lived through the neural bonding. People who had seen a 12% chance of survival and thought that was good enough to save their kind. The pilot of the lead ship spoke over the quantum channel, and her voice had a West Texas accent. "Hey Morrison, this is Betty Chen from the Titan shipyards. Sorry we're running late. The traffic was terrible. Now, where's that crushed fleet we heard you needed help with?" Jake looked through Sentinel's sensors at the impossible scene in front of him. 47 old warships floated in space, their hulls glowing with the same blue light that had woken Sentinel up. A human mind that had been asleep for 80,000 years was inside each one. People who heard his desperate message and thought that a 12% chance of survival was worth risking everything to save the world. Betty Chen's ship moved next to Sentinel, and Jake could feel her presence through their neural link. She was about 50 and older than him. She had the calm confidence that comes from fixing broken fusion drives for 30 years. She was a Warden-class defender in her Sentinel unit, and she flew it like she was born to do it. "Morrison, your ship looks like it went through a meat grinder," Betty said. Her Texas accent made the situation seem less dire. "Are you holding up over there?" Jake looked at Sentinel's damage through their shared mind. There were 14 holes in the hull, power was at 6%, weapons were completely off, and his body was running on adrenaline and stubbornness. "We're still alive. That means something." "Good enough." Betty's tactical display lit up and sent information to all 47 Sentinels that were being piloted by humans. "Those 5 crushed ships that got away from your surprise party are gathering at the edge of the system. They just called for backup, so we have about 30 minutes before this gets a lot worse." Other voices began to check in through the quantum channel. A nervous young man named Marcus Webb from the Mars colony flew a Scout-class Sentinel. He was only 22 years old. Rachel Torres, an engineer from the Europa station, was in charge of a heavy assault variant. Her voice sounded like someone who had seen too many friends die in industrial accidents. David Kim, a salvage operator, had made friends with an electronic warfare Sentinel. His ship was already jamming crushed communications. They were shipyard workers, mechanics, engineers, and maintenance crews. No soldiers. Not fighters. Just people who knew how to fix things and wouldn't give up when the odds were against them. Jake felt something grow in his chest, a mix of pride and fear. These people had answered his call. If this went wrong, he would be responsible for their deaths. "Listen up," Jake said, and all 47 pilots heard him over the quantum network. The Kresh have been wiping out civilizations for 50,000 years. They're experienced, they're ruthless, and they will not stop until every human is dead. But they've never fought anyone like us before. We're not military. We don't follow standard tactics. We're the people who keep civilization running when everything breaks down. So we're going to fight them the way we know how. With improvisation, stubbornness, and a complete refusal to accept that anything is truly broken beyond repair. "Hell yeah," someone said quietly over the channel, maybe Marcus. A few other people agreed. Jake continued, "The 5 crushed ships that are still around are damaged but still dangerous." Sentinel sent him tactical data directly to his brain. "Betty, Rachel, you two are the heavy hitters. I need you to get their attention and make them think you're the main threat. Marcus and David, your ships are fast. You're going to go around and hit their engines while they're not looking. A woman with a thick Russian accent asked, "What about the rest of us?" "The rest of you are with me. We're going to do something that the Kresh won't see coming." Jake was already planning their paths, using the debris field from the destroyed colony as cover. "We're going to take parts from their own dead ships and use them against the people who are still alive." There was a moment of shocked silence. Betty then laughed, and it sounded like gravel in a cement mixer. "You want to steal from dead bodies in the middle of a battle? Morrison, I think I like you." The plan was crazy, but these days that seemed to be Jake's thing. Betty and Rachel attacked the 5 Kresh survivors from the front, drawing their fire and attention. At the same time, Jake led a team of 15 sentinels into the debris field left behind by the reactor explosion. The Kresh ships that had been destroyed were in pieces, but their parts were spread out over thousands of kilometers of space. Weapons, power cores, and shield generators are all floating in space. Jake's years of fixing broken things came in handy. He could look at an alien piece of technology and figure out what it did and how it could be used in a different way or put together with other things. The neural link with Sentinel made this ability even better. It gave him the processing power to figure out structural integrity and compatibility on the fly. Jake told a pilot named Luis Garcia, "That power core. It's still charged. Can your ship connect to Kresh technology?" Luis said, "My Sentinel says it can change." His ship moved in and its mechanical arms reached out to grab the power core that was floating. "I never thought I'd be looking for alien technology in the middle of a war zone, but here we are." They worked quickly trying to beat the clock. Marcus and David were dancing around the Kresh survivors. Their faster ships were dodging return fire and landing hit-and-run attacks. Betty and Rachel were taking a beating, and their ships' shields were flaring up under heavy fire, but they held the line. Jake attached 3 Kresh weapon systems to Sentinel's hull, completely ignoring the ones that had been destroyed. The connections weren't pretty, and any engineer would have been horrified at how unsafe they were. But they did what they were supposed to do. That was all that was important. Jake said, "All ships, new weapons online. They're not set up for accuracy, but we won't need accuracy at close range. We'll need a lot of firepower." "Jake, I'm seeing new FTL signatures," David said from his electronic warfare sentinel. "Big ones. A lot of capital ships are on their way. The Kresh backup is coming early." Jake's heart sank. He watched as 30 more Kresh warships tore through space with Sentinel's long-range sensors. They came out of FTL with their weapons already hot. These weren't the same hunters they had fought before. Dreadnoughts were huge ships made to break through planetary defenses. Each one was twice as big as a Sentinel and had enough weapons to wipe out a whole continent. Rachel said, "We need to retreat right now. We're not ready to fight that many capital ships." She was correct. Jake agreed with her. 47 people who were not trained to fly against 30 new dreadnoughts and 5 hunters who were hurt but still deadly. The numbers didn't add up. They had saved some people by evacuating the colony, answering his call, and connecting with old ships, but that was the end of the story. They had fought for humanity's last chance, but it wasn't enough. Then Betty's voice broke through his sadness. "My Sentinel is picking up something. There's a huge energy signature building up in the debris field, right where the colony reactor went critical." Jake opened the sensor data and his eyes got big. The blast had done more than blow up Kresh ships. It had ripped a hole in space-time, a tear in the very fabric of reality. Physics said that his improvised reactor overload, along with all those Kresh reactors going off at the same time, shouldn't have been possible. "That's a wormhole forming," Sentinel said in his mind, and the AI's voice showed that it was amazed. "Unstable and unpredictable, but definitely a wormhole you can go through. It's as if the explosion broke the universe itself." Jake came up with a crazy, desperate, and probably suicidal idea. "Sentinel, can we control where that wormhole goes? Can we steer it?" "In theory, yes, but we don't have the power, and any mistake in the calculations would destroy any ship that tried it. What if we didn't need to be exact? What if we just had to make it big enough and point it at the Kresh fleet?" He thought Sentinel was processing this and running simulations. "You want to open a wormhole right into the oncoming dreadnoughts. Make them jump through an unstable spatial rift. The gravitational shear would kill most of them, and the ones that survived would be spread out across random points in space." Jake said quietly, "It will also destroy the ship that is controlling the wormhole. The energy feedback would overload every system. We wouldn't survive, even with our neural bonding." He could tell that the other pilots were listening and getting what he was saying through the quantum channel. One ship, one pilot, giving up their lives to save the other 46. To protect people. "Sure, I'll do it," Marcus said right away. I'm the youngest and least experienced. It makes sense for me to. No, Betty said. I've lived my life. 53 years, most of them good. You kids have futures ahead of you. I'll take care of the wormhole. With all due respect, Betty, we need you to train others, Jake said, already sending all of Sentinel's remaining power to the ship's gravitational systems. We're going to need experienced pilots to lead humanity's defense. I'm just a mechanic who got lucky. But I can guide this wormhole. I can buy you all time to get ready for what comes next. Jake, no, Rachel's voice broke up a little. There has to be another way. We just found each other and started fighting back. We need you. You need time more than you need me. Jake felt surprisingly calm as he flew Sentinel toward the growing wormhole. It was beautiful in a terrible way. There were colors that didn't exist in normal space swirling around a point of infinite darkness. The crash will keep coming. But if I can take out 30 dreadnoughts and scatter their fleet, you'll have weeks, maybe months to prepare. To find more Sentinels, bond with more pilots, and build a real defense. Betty said, there are 47 of us now, her voice thick. We could all fight together. Maybe we'd live. Or maybe we'd all die and there would be no one to protect humanity. Jake reached the wormhole's event horizon and felt its gravity trying to pull Sentinel apart. I've done the math, and this is the play that gives us the best chance. The Kresh dreadnoughts were 3 minutes away, and their weapons were charging for a bombardment that would have killed even 47 Sentinels. Jake started the hard work of changing the wormhole. He used Sentinel's gravitational systems to make it bigger and keep it stable enough to aim but not close enough to close. It was like trying to shape water with his bare hands, but the water was a tear in reality, and any mistake would kill him right away instead of later. David Kim suddenly said, Morrison, I'm getting messages from the lead Kresh dreadnought. They're broadcasting on human frequencies. They want to talk. Go ahead and do it. Jake's screen showed the Kresh commander's face. It had strange features that looked like they were either angry or respectful. The translation was very clear when it spoke. Human pilot. We have studied your strategies. We have seen your kind bond with remnant technology. This should be impossible. You should all be dead from the integration process. The commander stopped. We miscalculated. Humanity is more adaptable than we thought. You have earned the right to surrender. Power down your ships. Instead of killing you all, we will give you quick deaths. This is more mercy than we have shown any species in 5,000 years. Jake laughed, but it sounded bad in his helmet. Do you want to know the difference between you and us? You've spent 50,000 years getting better at conquering. We've spent our whole lives learning how to stay alive when things should kill us. Every person on these ships is here because they saw a 12% chance of survival and said, good enough. We don't know how to quit. We only know how to keep fighting until we win or die trying. He made the wormhole even bigger, even though Sentinel systems were screaming in protest. The rift was now huge, big enough to take in the whole Kresh fleet. There were colors that hurt to look at all around its edges. Space itself groaned from the pressure. Jake went on, so here's my answer to your mercy. Come and get us. We'll be here waiting. The face of the Kresh commander was gone. The dreadnought sped up to attack speed, getting closer. Jake put Sentinel at the control point of the wormhole, which was the only place where he could steer it and keep it stable. It was also the first and hardest place the energy feedback would hit when he let the rift close. All ships get out of the way, Jake told them. Betty, you're in charge. Get everyone out of the blast zone and don't look back. Jake. Betty's voice broke. Thank you for everything. Thank you for bringing us together and giving humanity a chance. The other 46 Sentinels turned and sped away, their engines lighting up blue in the dark. Jake watched them leave, proud that his urgent message had reached the right people. Mechanics and engineers who knew that sometimes you had to give up parts to save the whole machine. The Kresh fleet was almost close enough. Jake could now see each ship and read the weapon signatures as they locked onto Sentinel. He had about 30 seconds before they shot. Sentinel, Jake said softly, it has been an honor to fly with you. The honor has been mine, Jake Morrison. You taught me that survival isn't about having the best technology or the best plans. It's about not giving up. The AI stopped. My creators would have been proud to call you one of their own for what it's worth. Jake smiled. After that, he let go of the wormhole and let physics take over. The rift grew quickly, and its event horizon swallowed the lead Kresh dreadnoughts before they could even try to get away. Ships that had broken planets fell into a swirling mess, ripped apart by gravity that didn't care how strong their shields were. The feedback hit Sentinel like a huge wave of raw power. Jake could feel his neural link burning out and the ship's systems failing one by one. But he held on and kept the wormhole open, making sure that every last Kresh ship got through before he let it collapse. 28 dreadnoughts are gone. 5 hunters were killed. The biggest Kresh fleet in decades was either spread out across the galaxy or broken up. Not bad for a mechanic who works on a mining colony. Jake felt the wormhole collapse more than hurt it, and reality began to sew itself back together. The energy feedback reached its highest point, which was too much for Sentinel's other systems to handle. Jake's vision turned white, then red, and then it started to fade to black. Before he passed out, he thought that 46 pilots had gotten away. 46 people connected with old warships. It wasn't much, but it was a good start. And sometimes all you needed to fix something that was broken was a start. Jake Morrison stopped feeling anything at all when the universe went dark. Jake woke up to the sound of machines humming, which was strange but comforting for someone who had spent his whole adult life around broken machines. His body felt like it had been taken apart and put back together wrong, and every nerve ending was screaming in pain. The light hurt his brain like someone had replaced his optic nerves with hot wires when he tried to open his eyes. "Easy there, cowboy," Betty Chen's voice said from somewhere to his left. "You've been out for 3 days. Your neural link with Sentinel almost fried your whole nervous system. Doc says you're lucky to be alive, let alone awake." Jake was able to open his eyes, but he had to squint because of the light. He was in a medical bay with equipment that looked like people but was more advanced than anything the colony had ever had. He could see stars and the familiar curve of a planet's atmosphere through a window. Not Kepler 186. In a different place. "Where am I?" He croaked and his throat hurt like he'd been yelling. "Europa Station," Betty said, stepping into his line of sight. She had dark circles under her eyes and looked tired, but she was smiling. "Your ship was dead in space after you messed with the wormhole. We tractored you back here before the Kresh could regroup. It was touch and go whether you'd wake up." Jake tried to get up, but he quickly regretted it. He felt pain shoot through his head, and Betty's hands gently pushed him back down. "What about the other pilots? The Kresh fleet? All 46 of us made it out. Your sacrifice play worked. The Kresh lost 28 dreadnoughts and 5 hunters. This is the biggest defeat they've ever had." Betty's smile faded a little. "But Jake, we have problems. Big ones." She brought up a holographic screen that hung over Jake's bed. There were too many markers on the star charts to count, and some were red and some were blue. "The Kresh aren't giving up. Your little note about where the Sentinels are? It didn't just get to humans. Now every major power in this part of space knows about the ancient weapons. Some want to help us, but most want to take the ships for themselves. The Kresh have also officially declared humanity a Class 1 extinction threat." Jake's stomach dropped. "What does that mean?" "They're not sending hunter fleets anymore. They're putting all their military resources into killing us before we can bond with more Sentinels. We're talking about hundreds of warships, Jake. Maybe thousands. They're mobilizing their entire empire because 47 humans in ancient ships managed to bloody their nose." Jake saw another ship come into view through the viewport. A Sentinel with a hull that has been changed by people in ways that weren't planned. Weapon systems that didn't match, armor patches welded over damage. These were the kinds of quick fixes that made Jake's mechanic heart sing. It was ugly and not perfect, but it was also beautiful because it meant that someone else was still fighting. Jake asked, "How many more pilots have we found?" "Since you passed out, 12 more. That's 59 total now." Betty pulled up profiles of men and women from all over human space. Engineers, mechanics, and shipyard workers all had the same look of determination in their eyes. "We're getting about 5% of people who read your message to respond. Most people who try the neural bonding die, but the ones who live are learning quickly." Jake looked at the faces and remembered them all. These people heard his call and were willing to risk everything. Some of them looked like they were only 20. Some people had gray hair and faces that looked like they had been through a lot. They all agreed that risking their lives for a chance to save humanity was worth it. "Sentinel," Jake said softly, reaching out through the neural link that seemed to still be working. "Are you still there?" The AI's presence in his mind flickered, weaker than before but still there. "Still working but badly damaged. The medical team has been working on both your and my systems at the same time. We are still connected, Jake Morrison. I strongly suggest that you stay away from wormhole manipulations for a while." Jake said, "No promises," and then looked at Betty. "What's our strategic situation really?" Betty's face turned serious. She pulled up a tactical map that scared Jake to death. Red markers showing where the Kresh fleet was located surrounded human space like a noose that was getting tighter. There were blue markers all over the galaxy that showed where Sentinels were. Most of them were still asleep and couldn't be reached. We're outnumbered by at least 100 to 1, maybe more. The Kresh are moving slowly and setting up blockades around systems with buried sentinels. They're not trying to fight us directly anymore, they're cutting us off from reinforcements and starving us out. Betty zoomed in on a group of red markers. In 2 weeks, they'll have enough troops in place to attack every major human colony at the same time. Earth, Mars, Titan, all of them. We can't be everywhere at once. Jake could feel the weight of that on his shoulders. Billions of people had no idea that a threat to their lives was gathering around them. He thought about his parents who were both dead now, and how they had lived their whole lives without knowing that aliens existed. He thought about all the kids in colonies all over space who were playing, learning, and dreaming about futures they might never have. Then we don't try to be everywhere, Jake said slowly, his mechanic's mind working through the problem. We hit them where it hurts the most. We make them react to us instead of following through with their plan. Jake, there are 59 of us against thousands of Kresh warships. We can't win a fair fight. Good thing I've never fought straight in my life. Jake finally got up even though his body was telling him not to. Sentinel, get all the information you have on Kresh military doctrine. Their supply lines, command structure, and communication networks. Everything. The neural link sent a lot of information to Jake's mind. 80,000 years of remnant knowledge about their old enemy. The Kresh were well organized, efficient, and methodical. Their empire lasted for 50,000 years because they never took unnecessary risks or strayed from tried-and-true plans. That was their weak point. They were easy to guess. Jake saw the pattern and said, their fleets need to be resupplied on a regular basis. Antimatter fuel, spare parts, and ammo. They have supply depots all over the sector, and they're all heavily defended because they learned the hard way that supply lines win wars. Betty knew right away. You want to attack their logistics. Instead of fighting them directly, starve their fleets. Not just their logistics. Their command ships, sensor networks, and communication relays. Jake brought up a star chart and marked targets. We're mechanics. We know that every complicated system has weak spots. You don't have to destroy the whole machine, you just have to break the right parts at the right time. They came up with a plan that was both brilliant and crazy over the next hour. 59 sentinels would break up into small groups, each going after important Kresh infrastructure. They would use hit-and-run tactics, guerrilla warfare, and anything else that the well-planned Kresh military wasn't ready for. Make them spread their troops out so they have to protect thousands of weak points instead of just focusing on human colonies. It's not enough to save everyone, Betty said in a low voice. Even if we succeed, people will die. Colonies will fall before we can get to them. I know. Jake felt the weight of leadership settling on him, a duty he had never wanted but couldn't escape. But if we don't do anything, everyone dies. At least this way some of us live. Some of us keep fighting. A young pilot named Marcus Webb stood in the doorway, his face red with excitement. Jake, you're awake. When I heard what you did with that wormhole, I thought you were the craziest person I'd ever met. In a good way. Anyway, we've got news. 3 more sentinels just came online. Pilots from the Proxima colony were able to reach buried ships and survive the bonding. 62 now, Jake said, feeling a little better. Betty, tell them the plan. I need to talk to all the pilots and everyone else. We're about to start a war that we shouldn't win. Betty nodded and went away. Marcus stood in the doorway for a while, looking like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. Jake asked, "What are you thinking?" "My sister is on Mars," Marcus said in a low voice. "She has 2 kids. They don't know about any of this or that the Kresh are coming. I keep thinking about them and whether I'll ever see them again." He looked at Jake with eyes that were trying to be brave but couldn't quite hide the fear. "How do you do it? How do you keep going when things are this bad?" Jake thought about the question. He thought about fixing machines that should have stayed broken for 8 years, touching a ship that should have killed him, and fighting battles that he shouldn't have survived. He thought about a teacher who tried to protect 17 kids in a colony school with her own body. Jake said, "You remember why you're fighting. Not for some vague idea like civilization or humanity. For your sister. For her kids. For everyone who is counting on us to give them time to live their lives." He looked Marcus in the eye. "The odds don't matter. What matters is that we showed up to fight. Sometimes that's all that matters." Marcus nodded slowly and some of the fear left his face. "Thanks, Jake. I'll see you at the meeting." Jake sat alone in the medical bay after he left, looking at the stars. Kresh fleets were gathering somewhere to systematically wipe out his kind. An empire that was 50,000 years old and had technology and knowledge that made people look like kids playing with toys. But the Kresh didn't have what people did. 62 pilots who saw the odds and decided to fight anyway. People who worked as mechanics and engineers their whole lives to fix things that didn't make sense. People who are too stubborn to quit, even when quitting is the best thing to do. Sentinel, Jake said through their link, your creators fought the Kresh for 2,000 years and lost. Why do you think we can do better? The AI didn't say anything for a while before answering. My creators were brilliant warriors, tactical geniuses, and masters of technology that is far beyond what humans have ever done. But they had one big problem. What was that? They knew when they were beaten. They knew when the right thing to do was to give up. Jake felt something like respect flowing through the neural link. You people are different. You don't seem to get the idea of a lost cause. You fight battles that can't be won and somehow find ways to win. It's illogical, inefficient, and completely terrifying to anyone who tries to guess what you'll do next. Jake smiled even though everything was going wrong. So you're saying that our best weapon is that we don't know when to give up? I'm saying that sometimes the refusal to accept defeat is stronger than any weapon. My creators made me to protect developing civilizations. But I think they may have made me to wait for you. For humanity. For a species crazy enough to bond with ancient warships and declare war on an empire that has crushed civilizations for 50,000 years. Then I guess we shouldn't let them down, Jake said. He swung his legs off the medical bed and stood up even though it hurt. Prepare the ship, Sentinel. We need to win this war. You need at least another week of medical care before. We don't have a week. People are dying right now. Every hour we wait, another colony falls and another family disappears. Jake moved toward the door, each step more sure than the last. I've worked on worse injuries than this before. Once I fixed an engine core with a broken arm and a concussion. This is nothing. He walked through the hallways of Europa Station, following the mental map that Sentinel sent him through their link. Some pilots nodded in respect, while others looked at him like he was some kind of legend. Jake didn't like that. He wasn't anything special. He was just a mechanic who got lucky and wouldn't die. There were 62 Sentinel pilots in the briefing room. People from all over known space, all of them connected by old warships and impossible odds. Everyone stopped talking when Jake walked in. Betty stood at the front, with tactical displays showing where the Kresh fleet was and where they were going to attack. She nodded to Jake, giving him the floor. Jake looked at the people who were looking at him. Everyone, young and old, experienced and inexperienced, was equally scared and determined. These were his people now, whether he wanted to be responsible for them or not. 3 days ago, I woke up an old warship because I was too curious for my own good, Jake said. That choice killed a lot of people. It also brought all of you here and gave humanity a chance to fight an enemy we didn't know existed. I don't know if that makes me a hero or just someone who broke something he couldn't fix. He brought up the tactical display which showed their targets. The Kresh Empire has spent 50,000 years perfecting genocide. They've destroyed civilizations that were more advanced than ours. They've beaten enemies that were smarter, better prepared, and more experienced. By every logical calculation we should already be dead. Jake grinned. We're not logical, we're mechanics. We look at broken systems and figure out how to fix them. We take problems that seem impossible and solve them with duct tape and stubbornness. That's what we're going to do to the Kresh. We're going to break their perfect military machine. We're going to hit them in ways they can't see coming. We're going to make them afraid of 62 people in old ships. He looked each pilot in the eye one at a time. Some of us won't make it back. Maybe most of us. But the ones who do will give humanity time to prepare, find more sentinels, and build a real defense. Our job isn't to win this war. Our job is to make sure there's still a humanity left to fight it. Rachel Torres got up from her chair. When are we going? 1 hour. Betty will give out teams and goals. Stay smart, stay alive, and remember why we're fighting. Jake stopped. For every person who needs us, for every kid who deserves a future, and for every mechanic who ever looked at a broken machine and said, I can fix this. The pilots left in groups and each one stopped to get their orders from Betty. Jake watched them leave, feeling the weight of being in charge and knowing that he would never see some of those faces again. Sentinel's presence made him think. Are you ready for this, Jake Morrison? Are you ready to lead people into a war we can't win? Jake thought about his sister on Mars, Marcus's family, and the billions of people in human space who had no idea that their lives were in danger because of 62 makeshift warriors. He said, no. But it's time to go to work, whether you're ready or not. Jake Morrison had touched an old warship buried in ice 6 months before, which had started a war that would change the galaxy. 6 months of hit-and-run raids, desperate battles, and wins that shouldn't have happened. The Kresh Empire had spent 50,000 years destroying civilizations without breaking a sweat. Now they were learning what it was like to fight an enemy that wouldn't follow the rules. Jake stood on the bridge of Sentinel and watched through the viewport as 3 Kresh supply convoys burned in the dark of space. His ship's hull was now covered in scars, with Kresh armor and human welding work that would make any good engineer cry. It flew, and that's all that mattered. There were 59 other Sentinel ships in formation around him, and each one was just as damaged. Each one had a human crew member who had decided that impossible odds were just another engineering problem to solve. In the last month they had lost 3 pilots. Amanda Foster had been making jokes until a Kresh missile broke through her shields. Robert Chin, who had stopped an entire Kresh squadron so the rest of his team could get away. Lisa Martinez, whose ship just stopped working during a raid on a communications hub. 3 names were added to a list that Jake kept in his head. These were 3 people who had answered his call and died. But their sacrifices had given people something very valuable. Time. All ships, report status, Jake said over the quantum channel that linked all the Sentinel pilots. One by one voices checked in. Betty Chen's Texas drawl was as steady as ever. Marcus Webb, who had survived 4 battles that should have killed him. Rachel Torres, whose brilliant strategies had saved many lives. David Kim, whose electronic warfare had turned Kresh's strengths into weaknesses. 59 voices, 59 people who had become more than just mechanics and engineers. They had become a shield for humans. Betty said, "The supply convoy has been neutralized. That's the 3rd one this week. The Kresh fleets near the Proxima system are going to run out of fuel soon." Jake brought up the tactical display and looked at the web of red markers that showed where the Kresh were. Those markers had been all around human space like a new 6 months ago. Now the pattern was different. It was scattered and reactive instead of coordinated. The Kresh still had a lot more people and weapons, but they were spread out trying to protect thousands of weak spots from 60 ships that could attack from anywhere. "Sentinel, show me the big picture," Jake said through their neural link. The AI made a holographic map that covered the whole bridge. Blue markers showed where people lived, green markers showed where Sentinel ships had just woken up, and red markers showed where Kresh ships were known to be. But there was something new on the map that made Jake's heart race with cautious hope. Yellow markers all over dozens of systems showed that other alien civilizations had been watching humanity's impossible fight. Sentinel said, "We're getting a transmission. Origin, the Valex Concordance. They want to talk to you directly, Jake." The Valex were an ancient civilization that had survived Kresh attention by staying quiet and not doing anything important. Jake had never talked to them before. He wasn't sure he wanted to start right now. "Let it go." A holographic figure appeared in front of Jake. It looked somewhat human but had features that made it clear it was not from this world. The Valex person looked at Jake with eyes that had too many colors, then spoke in perfect English, which Sentinel translated right away. "Mechanic Morrison. We have been watching your war with the Kresh Empire. Your tactics are crude, your technology is weak, and your chances of survival are very low." The alien stopped. "The Kresh have made it clear that they think your species is interesting. They say that humans pose an existential threat to galactic stability and are asking all civilizations to stop supporting you and share information about human movements." Jake's jaw got tight. "Let me guess. You're here to tell me that the Valex are following Kresh's orders?" "No." The alien's face changed into what could have been a smile. "We're here to tell you that 43 civilizations have turned down the Kresh ultimatum. Your refusal to accept extinction has reminded us that the Kresh Empire is not invincible. Maybe we've been cowards for too long." Jake felt something change in his chest, a mix of hope and disbelief. "What do you mean?" "We are saying that the fight for humanity has led to action. Not direct military support. We are not stupid enough to declare open war on the Kresh. But information, resources, safe places for your pilots to land, and quiet help that keeps you from being caught." The Valex representative's colors changed. "You have shown the galaxy that the Kresh can bleed. That is worth supporting." Jake was alone on the bridge after the transmission ended, trying to figure out what had just happened. For 6 months, people had been fighting by themselves against impossible odds. And now, because 60 pilots wouldn't give up, because they had hurt the empire that thought it was untouchable, other civilizations were finding the strength to fight back. "It's working," Betty's voice said from behind him. She had gotten on Sentinel while Jake was deep in thought. 6 months ago you made a plan. Make the Kresh look weak and get others to stand up. Jake, we're really doing this." Jake said softly, "We've still lost planets. The Kresh wiped out the Callisto colony last month. We couldn't get there in time, so 15,000 people died. And 3 billion people on Mars are still alive because we got to that Kresh staging area before they could attack." Betty moved next to him. Jake, you can't save everyone. No one can. But we're saving more people than we're losing. That's what winning looks like in this kind of war. Jake could see the other pilots fixing their ships after the battle through Sentinel sensors. Marcus was helping a new pilot named Jennifer Davis fix damage to the hull. He was showing her how to make temporary fixes that would last through one more fight, which he had learned from Jake. Rachel was leading a group of 5 pilots through tactical drills. They had only gotten to know their Sentinels 3 weeks before. David was telling everyone who would listen about electronic warfare. They were giving lessons, teaching others what they knew and building something that would last longer than any one pilot. The start of a real military force instead of just making things up as you go along. Sentinel, how many dormant units can we still reach? Jake asked. The Kresh have set up blockades around the other locations, making it impossible to get to them with the resources we have right now, the AI said. But I can see something strange. The Sentinels that are still asleep are starting to send out low-level signals. They are waking up on their own because so many of their sister ships have been activated. Jake felt a chill run down his back. They're calling out. They want pilots. Yes. The remnant fleet was made to work as a network defense system. As more units come online, they get stronger, share processing power and tactical data. If we can get to those 41 ships and connect them with pilots who can use them, we will have over 100 Sentinels ready to go. 100 ships, Betty said with a sigh. That's enough to fight back for real, not just raids and harassment. We could protect whole areas. Jake found the locations of the Sentinels that were open. They were all over the place. Some were in human territory, some were in neutral zones, and a few were in systems controlled by civilizations that had just promised to stay out of the way. It would take months to reach them all, and the Kresh would fight to stop every single bonding. But it was doable. Hard, dangerous, and likely to cost more lives, but possible. Send out a new message, Jake said. Do it the same way as before, but this time add testimonials from current pilots. Show people that the bonding process can be done. We're not just trying to delay extinction, we're trying to win. The change sped up over the next 3 months. There are now 76 pilots who have successfully bonded with Sentinels. Then there were 32 more, some of whom were from alien civilizations that had secretly come to Earth with their own volunteers. The remnant ships didn't care about what kind of species they were, only if they could work together. The neural link would work if someone could be flexible, stubborn, and good at coming up with new ways to solve problems. The Kresh's response was more violence. Because they couldn't keep up with the Sentinel's speed or the pilots' unpredictable strategies, they instead went after civilians, trying to get people to stop being offensive and stay in one place. It was a plan that had worked against many other kinds of life. It didn't work on people who had spent their whole lives refusing to choose between 2 impossible options. Jake led an attack on a Kresh command carrier that was planning attacks on human colonies. Instead of fighting the escorts, his team used David's hacking skills to get into the carrier's systems, turn its own weapons against it, and then jump away before the Kresh could respond. The destruction of the carrier threw 3 whole Kresh fleets into chaos, which saved 2 colonies that were only a few hours away from being bombed. Rachel came up with a defensive strategy that used small, mobile response teams that could get to colonies that were in danger faster than the Kresh could plan attacks. Marcus was an expert at training new pilots. His natural ability to teach and positive attitude helped rookies get through their first missions. Betty became the voice of reason, the steady leader who kept everyone on track with the big picture instead of letting them get lost in the horror of each battle. And Jake, the mechanic who had never wanted to be in charge, was becoming something he had never thought he would be. A sign. The person who had touched an old ship and wouldn't let his kind die in peace. 9 months after Jake first saw the buried Sentinel, he went back to Kepler 186. The colony had been rebuilt, and now it was better protected by orbital platforms and a permanent Sentinel patrol. There was a memorial in the ice cave where he found the ship. The names of all the colonists who died in the first Kresh attack were carved into the frozen walls. Jake walked through the rebuilt colony and saw some familiar faces. Patterson had become an unexpectedly good link between the military on Earth and the military on other planets. Tommy Rodriguez is now teaching new pilots how to fix things in an emergency. Dr. Park had come up with medical procedures to help pilots get through the neural bonding process. A group of kids ran by, laughing and playing, not knowing that they had been just hours away from death 9 months ago. One of them, a girl who looked to be about 7 years old, stopped and stared at Jake with big eyes. "Are you the icebreaker?" she asked, using the name the press had given him after he destroyed the first Kresh fleet. Jake got down on one knee to be at her level. "I fix things that are broken. I'm just a mechanic. My teacher says you fixed the galaxy, the girl said with a serious face. Is that real? Jake thought about the answer to that question. About 59 other pilots put their lives on the line every day. About Lisa Martinez, Amanda Foster, and Robert Chin, whose names were carved in ice with the other dead. About 1 billion people in human space who were still alive because 60 pilots had decided that impossible odds were just another problem to solve. Jake said softly, the galaxy isn't fixed yet. Still a lot of broken parts, but we're getting there. One piece at a time. The girl smiled and ran back to her friends. Jake stood there watching her leave, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the hope. Sentinel's presence made him think. The Kresh have made an official statement. They are offering a ceasefire and talks. They say the war has become too expensive to keep going. Jake felt a wave of shock go through him. The Kresh, who had never talked to anyone they wanted to kill, were asking to talk. Is it real? Analysis suggests yes. In the past 9 months, we've cost them more ships than they've lost in the past 1,000 years. Their empire is falling apart, other civilizations are getting bolder, and they can't predict our tactical decisions well enough to counter effectively. Sentinel paused. You have done what my creators could not. You have made the Kresh realize that they cannot get rid of humans without paying a terrible price. So we did it? No. We've reached a temporary balance. The Kresh will honor a ceasefire while they regroup, come up with new plans and try to figure out how humans fight. In 5 years, maybe 10, they will try again. But you have given humanity time to prepare, to get stronger, and to change from a species on the verge of extinction into a galactic power that can't be ignored. Jake looked up at the stars and thought about what was to come. There were Sentinel ships all over space, and each one protected a developing civilization just like the remnants had planned. About how mechanics and engineers from Earth taught alien races how to fight back against empires that thought they were unbeatable. About kids playing in rebuilt colonies and growing up in a galaxy where people had shown they belonged. Jake said, then we should make good use of that time. Because we'll be ready when the Kresh come back. He walked back to Sentinel, his ship, and his partner, the old weapon that had chosen a human mechanic to carry on the legacy of a civilization that had died trying to protect others. The hull was damaged and patched up, and it stayed together because of stubbornness and makeshift fixes. It was ugly and flawed, but it was also very beautiful. Just like people. Betty was waiting at the boarding ramp with her data pad. 3 more Sentinel locations just opened up. Ships are already getting ready for the recovery missions. Mars University also wants to start a formal Sentinel pilot training program and is asking if you would be willing to help design the curriculum. Jake grinned. That's either the best or worst idea I've ever heard. A school for teaching people how to bond with ancient alien warships and fight impossible battles. Betty said, probably both. So, are you in? Jake thought about all the young engineers and mechanics in human space who were looking at broken machines right now and refusing to believe that some problems couldn't be fixed. People who were the perfect Sentinel pilots because they were stubborn, creative, and able to change. Yeah, he said. Count me in. Someone needs to show these kids how to fix a galaxy. As he climbed aboard Sentinel, he could feel the ship's systems come to life around him and the neural link buzzing with a familiar connection. He could see the rebuilt colony through the viewport, with kids playing and families going about their daily lives. All of it is still here and doing well because 60 people touched old ships and wouldn't let humanity die. Some people were born to fix things. Jake Morrison had been fixing broken machines for as long as he could remember. It turned out that saving a species from extinction was just another repair job. Hard, risky, and probably not possible. But Jake had never let something be impossible stop him before. Where to, Jake? Sentinel asked through their link. Jake opened the star charts and looked at the places where dormant Sentinels were waiting to be awakened, the human colonies that needed protection, and the galaxy that had been broken by 50,000 years of Kresh rule. All over, Jake said. We have work to do. The engines of Sentinel came to life, and the mechanic in the old warship jumped into the air, ready to fix whatever needed fixing. One broken piece of the galaxy at a time.